Hey everyone, this is Blake, Community Manager over at DZone. Today we're on DZone Live, Episode 7, our kind of writing summit. We've got a great agenda today. We'll have John Vester on, then we'll have Connor over from Linear B, some exciting things going on there. And then to round out our DZone Live Episode 7 today, we've got Mr. Magic Thomas Hansen on, talking about magic. Might get some good Cypress views and talk about no code, low code, all that fun stuff. So without further ado, our first featured guest, let's bring him up, John Vester. And so if you've been on DZone, John has written over 300 articles, 335, and the big thing is 22.7 million page views. 22, that's not a mistake, 22.7 million page views. And so for John, for those that may not be familiar, I'm sure there's a small percentage of the audience that's not, if you could tell people a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, so I've been in information technology for over 30 years now, which that was nothing but dumb luck. I mean, if you would have walked up to me in college and said, "Wow, you're getting ready to graduate," I'd say, "Yeah." It's like, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm probably going to be a bank manager." I had no idea, and I had worked in the. I didn't want to have a computer science degree. I wasn't excited about doing COBOL, so I went the business route, business school, business management, economics route, and they had a computer lab in the College of Business, and started working there. And as I started looking in the one ads, because there was no Monster back then in the 90s, I started seeing Novell NetWare, PC programming. I'm like, wait, I've been doing this for the last 3 or 4 years, and I had no idea that this PC revolution was going to kick off. So I got into that, and all my life have a music background, originally with the Berklee College of Music in Boston. And so there's that creative side, and I've always enjoyed writing. And so along the way, I feel like that I've had this unique combination of creativity, musician, which is, I guess, not uncommon in IT, but then the whole business side of understanding the business layer, right out of the gate. So that kind of got me to really explore different options. And over the years, I've kind of evolved into this technical architecture role, taking on more complex problems. And along the way, back in 2015, I got this note because I had to go on a project. To use JSF Seam. I didn't even know what it was. And so I stumbled across this ref card, which I didn't know what that was either. And all of a sudden I get these DZone mailers. And about a year later, I saw like looking to make some extra money. I'm like, yes. Want to write for DZone? Yes. Well, then join us. And so since 2015, I started writing. And like Blake said, 335 articles later, like here I am. So I'm so Josh, honored to have that many page views. I never ever thought it was possible. I mean, if you still take all of my personal blog page views, I think my lowest page view on DZone is still more than all those articles together. So I'm grateful for the opportunity and the entire team. So that's kind of my flyover introduction.
Nice. And you're at the CleanSlate Technology Group today. What does that company do?
Well, so we're professional services, mostly in the cloud space. Interestingly, there's probably 3 or 4 guys that I worked with 20 years ago, and I was actually trying to recruit one of those members who had been at CleanSlate to come work with me where I was at in a full-time position, and he kind of turned the tables on me. And they've been like the best consulting experience that I've ever experienced. And I've been a consultant maybe 3 or 4 times, and it's because of the management structure that has been in the industry for the last 20 years. So they understand what value we bring to the table and then kind of put that in the right light, which sometimes gets swept under the rug at other places I've been. So they keep us hopping with technical challenges, and it's a great team to work with. I've worked remote for over 4 years now, pre-COVID. And that was what was kind of funny is they're like, well, here's how you get ready to work remotely. And I went through this checklist. It's like, wait, I've been like pandemic aware for 3 years before this even happened. So my life really didn't change, other than I think I was a lot more busy with work.
Nice. And then for your writing on DZone, have you ever been stopped anywhere, like you're grocery shopping and someone says, hey, I saw that use Salesforce without Salesforce. Have you ever been stopped anywhere?
No, nobody cares where I live. They don't care. They don't know me. So no, I don't think anybody has ever said, wow, that's great. I mean, other than my mom. Does my mom count?
Yeah, definitely any family members count.
that Salesforce stuff is good. It's like, all right, thanks, Mom. She
Nice.
doesn't really sound like that though.
Yeah, so that's a good.
And I don't actually have a ghost here. I actually have a cat that just opened up my office door. So I don't know how noisy it's going to get, but the cat came in.
That's the joy of live and remote. So never
That's right.
never a dull moment. And then looking at DZone, what are some of been your like some of your favorite and most rewarding articles personally for yourself?
Oh my gosh. So yeah, the ones that make me laugh are my favorite. Like things I learned from Dateline NBC that helps me in my IT career. What can Kanye teach us as IT professionals? You know, those kind of articles that are like, if we had a dev life zone, that's where they would be. Those are the favorite ones to write from that perspective. The other ones are the ones that like really hit home whenever Oracle announced they were changing their licensing structure and everybody had fear. I was able to like throw together a really quick article, and your team, Blake, was able to turn that around in a matter of hours, which was awesome. And we really hit the market and got a lot of interest from that. So those are equally as interesting. But then this latest series, using Salesforce without using Salesforce, is something I've wanted to do for a few years now. It's like, well, Salesforce is great, but maybe you don't like that UI, maybe you don't like the experience. Well, how can we not use Salesforce? And there's only one article in the 7 articles actually published now, and it's where I took a Spring Boot service and I put caching in front of it so that we can minimize the API calls and get data from Salesforce, just simple contacts. But I've already written the articles, and I've just got to get them to where I'm really happy with them, to where I use this Svelte framework, which I don't even know if I'm saying it right, to say, wow, I've never used that before. Let me learn that and write about it. And then I use Vue to do a different perspective for that data. And then I use React Native to like make a iOS and Android client. Well, that's another article. And then I'm working on now the Angular side, where I'm actually going to use that data, wrap it in an SSE, have that go to NGRX and update dynamically. Well, I hadn't done really much of that before, so it's like a learning opportunity. And then I'm actually going to turn the tables and say, what if I want to use this, the Lightning Web Components outside of Salesforce? So kind of flipping the table. So planning on doing that next, and then a big conclusion of what do we find out from this experience? So my hope is that whenever somebody's looking for something, like I was looking for JSF Seam, that they can say, wow, I need to use Salesforce data with my Vue client, that they find our article and they're able to learn something from it and pull the Git-based repository I have online to help them. So that's the end goal, right?
Nice. And you have some of the best titles on DZone. How long do you like spend to come up with some of the amazing titles? Because when you write the articles, and it's like, well, how do I like describe this in 5 to 10 words? And that can be really tough for a lot of aspiring writers.
Yeah, sure thing. A lot of the times the title, especially when I wasn't working remotely, would come to me on the way home. It's like it was the 4th of July, and I saw a sign for the fireworks show in our local town here. I was like, wait a minute, look, fireworks application. Wow, what fireworks are in your application? What are you doing to really wow the customer? And that sometimes the title is where it starts, and definitely the Kanye thing, because he was in the news like being himself. I thought, wow, people are like he's trending. So how can we learn? What can we learn from Kanye, right? And so, sometimes it's the article that is driven by the title. But I agree with you 100%. Sometimes you have this great article and you're like, wow, how can I summarize this to where somebody really wants to read it? And so there's been many times, though, that the editors at DZone have actually changed the title. I'm 100% happy with that and okay with it.
Nice. Well, we definitely got to do that now, because you definitely 22 million page views. You're definitely onto something there, as we'd say. And then for people today that are like somewhere working in software that maybe have a lot of knowledge, what do you think it takes for them to be where that light switch goes off and like, hey, you know what? I've got all this knowledge or information. It could be like in a small part or a big part, where they suddenly go, hey, I should write about this and like share this knowledge out. What do you think it takes for people to like get that epiphany or that moment to say, hey, I could write about this?
Yeah. So there's like a fork in the road, right? Because I'm really, I think, more skilled at doing the writing, but my friend Russell and another friend, David Poindexter, both have known for years. They're way better in different ways. Like they're awesome at Twitch, right? The David Poindexter especially, he'll come out and he's like Robert Tables on Twitch if you ever want to find him. He'll go on at 4 o'clock and he'll say, I don't really know what we're doing today. And he has this like little text editor. He's like, okay, here's my idea. And for the next hour, he just pursues it and goes down that path and writes it, where I'm the person that has to get it working, know why it's working, and then turn that into an article. So the first step is to find out, well, where's your passion? Are you okay with doing a video? And when I did the Kong surface example, and I did a video for it, I thought, I'm going to try this. I'm going to make a YouTube video that kind of walks through everything I just did, so you can see how easy it is. That was the hardest part for me, because I'm like, man, I'm stumbling for my words. I'm not used to talking. I feel like I'm looking away at my notes too much. And so that's not me. Where this David Poindexter guy, Robert Tables, he's great at doing that. So the key is to find out, where can you add value? Where are you comfortable? And where do you think you can excel the most?
Great. And then if somebody were to come up to you and say, hey, John, love your work, I'm thinking about writing, what are like 1 or 2 tips or things I should keep in mind as I write, just so that the work that I do, if I'm going to do it, it's going to translate and be good?
Oh yeah. So the first thing is, I can't say it enough. I said it whenever I was on my last call, is the outline, right? If you struggle to come up with the 5 bullet points, you have an introduction, an inclusion, and conclusion, if I can say that, then you should have like 3 at least in the middle, and every one of those should have sub points, to kind of explain what it is. So it's almost like my wife's not technical. And if I can't go into her and say, hey, I'm writing an article about this, and convey those 5 topics, then I feel like I'm not really ready to do that article. So it's when I get to that point where I like the outline, I run it by a friend, say Michael Bogan, who I've known for years. He's also a DZone writer, and he'll give me the thumbs up or thumbs down. He'll give me suggestions. Like on that series, he said, dude, you should do something with Svelte. I said, what's Svelte? It's like, it's some JavaScript framework that's taken off. Okay, well, then let's try it. And so the outline is the key, though. And once you get the outline, then I often write the intro and the conclusion. It's that lost series effect that I talked about once before in another live call. It's like when they wrote the pilot for Lost, the series of a success on ABC, they also wrote the final episode. And so they knew where they started and they knew where they were ending. And the path was, how do we navigate the viewer through this whole process to get there?
Yeah, that's definitely great and brilliant advice. And then last question, looking ahead, we're already through the middle point of 2021, if you can believe it. What are the trends in technology and software that you think we'll be talking about, or maybe that excite you for 2022?
Well, I've really found a deep passion for event-driven work. And so that my project I'm on, almost all the complex functionalities moved to event-driven work, where we're doing a lot of work with true microservices. So I hope to personally be diving deeper in that for the next year or so. I'm really become a fan in all of my writing this year of this mission statement. I got to drag it so I can actually read it. It's been in every one of my articles. It says, focus your time on delivering features and functionality which extends the value of your intellectual property. And then it says, leverage frameworks, products, and services for everything else. So as an example, we're using AWS now because we've got to, we realize the value in someone else managing our infrastructure. So all of my articles this year have been, how can I make things better? And personally, I was using AWS, and I felt like I was struggling to give features in my applications, my personal applications. So I found Heroku, and I've been using that, and I found out that, wow, I can focus on doing features in the limited time I have. So my whole series is like, well, how can I do things? So then there's Kong, and it can add this layer. Well, they do a lot of the work for you. So I guess the microservices, I think they're gonna actually evolve to where they're true microservices, maybe even to where small services talk to small databases, and you keep things as isolated as possible. So I would guess growth of microservices, increase of providing services which you're doing that you probably shouldn't be doing, are a couple of key things.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, John Vester from CleanSlate Technology Groups, one of the most popular DZone authors of all time. It's an honor to have you as our featured guest on episode 7 today. And thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's an honor to write for DZone. You guys make me way better than I would have been otherwise. So thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, John. All right. And up next, we've actually got a walk-out video for our next person. So let me play this video and get our next guest up here.
Awesome. Thanks, Blake.
All right. Next up on DZone Live episode 7, we've got Connor from Linear B. And from the video, you can see he's doing this big Interact conference and also does Dev Interrupted. So like talking about writing articles, but there's also stuff where people are now like getting onto podcasts. So having the writing thing, we definitely wanted to make sure we had Connor here so he could talk about it from the podcast. So if you, Connor, tell people a little bit about yourself, a little bit about Interact, and then a little bit for those not familiar with Dev Interrupted, what that is.
Sure thing, Blake. And thank you so much for having me on today. We're actually really excited that DZone is one of our presenting partners for Interact as well. So that's a very exciting congruency here. And honestly, I feel like I'm not hyped enough for that walkout music. That was great. So I'm glad we worked that in, but now I got to live up to that and live up to John. That's a lot of pressure. But I just started writing on DZone recently. I work for Linear B. We're a startup based out of Santa Monica. We do dev observability, metrics, and orchestration for dev teams. Really cool tool if you want to check it out. But we also have this major Dev Interrupted community that we sponsor with over 1,500 engineering leaders in our Discord community, which you can find at discord.gg/devinterrupted. And we write articles and produce a weekly podcast through our devinterrupted.com website, where you can find out a lot more. And we're really proud to partner with DZone to put together our, as we said, biggest thing we've done yet, our continuous community conference, Interact, which will take place on September 30th. It's going to feature some incredible speakers like Twitter's VP of Engineering, Maria Gutierrez, Linear B's CEO, Ori Karen, and many, many more. So we're incredibly excited for that. I'm personally stoked for the DZone after party that we're going to do for that event. So keep an eye out for that. I know Blake's excited to put some zany ideas together and make something really cool. But yeah, I'm happy to be here today. I've been writing for a long time, but not necessarily for DZone until recently. But I've also been doing a lot of podcasting. I know that's one thing we want to talk about because I not only produce a personal podcast, but I produce the Dev Interrupted podcast. We feature leaders like Eric Johnson, CTO of GitLab. We've had on other folks like Ian Noland, SVP at Datadog. We've got Brendan Burns, Microsoft CVP and Kubernetes co-founder on next week, actually. A lot of incredible guests there, and we're hopefully doing stuff that's really valuable for engineering leaders, and it's growing our community rapidly.
Yeah, and I think what's great there is typically like in the past, if you got on like anyone like in software, engineering, things like that, it would be like a long form text article and there'd be maybe like one paragraph or two paragraphs of what they said. And then if you saw them like in person or somewhere else, you're like, whoa, this is like a totally different person than I thought they were. And so like what I love with Dev Interrupted, things like where you get on podcasts, you allow like a John Vester to breathe. You allow like someone from Facebook or GitLab to breathe. So I guess where do you see kind of like that origin of Dev Interrupted and kind of like what y'all were thinking as you sort of went the route of doing this podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what it comes down to is our co-founders at Linear B, Ori, and our COO, Dan Lyons, they're both former VPs of engineering, and they felt like for them, there was never a really in-depth discussion of like how engineering leaders not only became the roles they are, so moving up from an individual developer to a dev manager, director, VP, CTO, et cetera, but there wasn't a discussion of in-depth of like how to do their role. There's a lot of communities where people talk about, how do we do something in React, or how do we use JavaScript for this, or or what do we kind of dive into for some of these different like learning experiences? You go to Stack Overflow, all these different places. But there isn't as much for engineering leaders. And that transition from being an individual developer, where you're really an individual contributor, you're kind of Superman, just going out doing stuff, fixing problems. Even if you're working in a team, it's still kind of on you in a lot of respects. To actually managing that team and having to think very differently is a hard transition. One of our other folks, Rocco Saboth, wrote an article about this recently that I thought was really on point, talking about kind of the 3 stages of like controllingness that you get as an engineering manager as you're trying to figure this out. And that's something that Dan and Ori have really experienced, where they said, okay, like we want to provide this kind of engineering leadership resource where we can give people not only the podcast, but then turn that podcast into articles, short form highlights, so that anyone who wants to consume it has a variety of ways to do it. And this is obviously a great content strategy for any startup, any group that's kind of doing this. But you can take a long form podcast, you can do stuff like what Chris Walker is doing over on LinkedIn and turn it into like multiple LinkedIn videos, multiple articles, et cetera. So it's a great way to distribute it. And there's a lot of things you learn as you start doing it. I've, as I mentioned, done a personal podcast called Growing the Green Economy, talking about sustainability and growth in tech. But some of the things I've learned are, as one example, everyone talks about consistency, but they don't really talk about kind of the details behind that. So, you'll hear a lot of people who podcast say, oh, you have to release every Wednesday at X time, be consistent, build an audience, which is great advice. But people don't talk about the amount of research that should go into it beforehand, about, how to develop the hosting skills you need to really get great stories out of your guests. And that's just as important, because if the content isn't wonderful, if you aren't able to make your guests feel comfortable, you're not going to do what's right for your audience or for the guest. Great.
And then just to kind of, for the people out there on the Dev Interrupted, so essentially your podcasts are, sort of in the 30-minute mark, if I got that right, and you'll put it out as an audio podcast.
I've been doing a couple longer ones recently, I'm not going to lie. So.
Yeah, right. And so, but you sort of let it breathe. And then you take it, you get the audio out, but then you'll also translate either parts of it or like the whole thing into a longer blog article, essentially. Yep. And then you'll take maybe some pull quotes or different points from it, and those could also get sprinkled into your content.
Exactly. And then we're also doing like highlight videos. So, I'll go back through and when I'm producing the podcast, I'll go through it and I'll transcribe with an AI tool and then kind of go through and say, okay, what are some of our best clips here where we have, like a really wonderful nugget from someone. So maybe it's, as Brandon Burns in 2 weeks, I'm sure we're going to publish this one as a clip, but he has this great discussion where he talks about, setting up the Kubernetes community and the importance of like being really involved and helping engage folks. Or maybe it's Heidi Williams from Grammarly, who we had on as a recording, and she's going to come out in a couple weeks here, and that'll be out. And she talks about hypergrowth and scaling. And so there's some really incredible nuggets there that, like, yeah, we want folks to listen to the whole podcast, but if someone doesn't have the time, or maybe they just aren't really into podcasts, we want them to also be able to access this information, because there's these incredible nuggets where you get like 2-3 minutes of someone dialing in on a topic, and we want that to be accessible too.
Great. And so then just to kind of summarize for anyone looking to do podcasting, if you had to say hey Connor, this sounds great, this is interesting, what are the 3 things I need to do? Can I just get some basic technical stuff that I can create a lab? And then as I start to create them and start to book guests, what are the things I really need to keep in mind so I don't get into mud or anything?
So on the technical side, it's really pretty basic. Like, you can do your podcast with the free Audacity tool for your editor and like a Blue Yeti microphone, which is, I don't know, maybe like $75 now, maybe less. And I do recommend getting one of these little pop, I forget exactly what they're called, but these little pop filters that'll help keep your S's and some other like stronger words from popping too much. They'll make the audio sound better. They're like $10 on Amazon. But it's a very minimal technical outlay to get that set up. I do recommend, if you have the time and really want to get into it, a tool called Descript, which is I think $30 a month as an editor. But they do a great job with some AI tools to really help make things sound really quality, and it gives you a lot of options. If you're going to get really into it, I recommend upgrading to that. But as far as just like tips for actually doing the work, the key things that I found, number one is research. Understand who your guest is really well before they come on, because it'll prepare you for the conversation. And you can also share stuff in advance with the guests so they can think about these like stories that you want to get out of them. So, people love to have information conveyed in stories. And obviously we want to get into technical details. We want to ask like key questions, but we want to give the guests an opportunity to be prepared too. And some guests will come on and it doesn't matter. They don't need any prep. They're ready to go. But depending on the person, like myself, I have some notes right here I wrote before this to make sure that I didn't go totally off script. And it's always nice when someone can say, hey, here are some of the things I want to talk about based off of my research on you. And then you can have like a really strong conversation and you can take it anywhere you want from there. But there's some common ground to start on and it makes things flow a lot more easily. So that'd be like my first one for sure.
Great.
The second one is, as a host, to really practice how you are presenting and how you are engaging with the guest. You want to make them feel extremely comfortable. And so, yes, research can help with that. But if in the conversation you're stilted or you're just asking questions, not giving them feedback, not kind of engaging back, this should be a two-way conversation, even if it's in an interview style format. You can still come away and say, oh, what you said is really interesting. And here's how I think about it. Or here's a story that's similar. Like, what do you think? So that two-way engagement is super important because generally with a podcast, you're not going to have a live audience. We're not all, NPR's Wait, Don't Tell Me, where they've got like this whole auditorium full half the time, or you can kind of see what's going on. Like usually most of us are talking to one other person on, Zoom or maybe in the room, maybe a couple of people if we're doing like an all-in style pod. And so that feedback between the host and the guest is really important. Otherwise, the guest is kind of flailing around like, is this where I should go? So there'll be two things for sure. And then the third thing I'd say is have fun with it, because this format can be really fun. And I know this sounds cliche, but what you're doing is you're having this in-depth conversation with someone where you're both exchanging information and learning. It should be like a growth opportunity for the guest and the host to practice their speaking, to engage on topics they care about. And when you're having that really strong, fun conversation, it'll come through in the content. Like there's certain pods that we record where I go, okay, this one's all right. Like the information's good, but I can tell the guest and the host just didn't quite vibe. And there are other ones where I go, oh, this is so much fun. Like they clearly enjoyed this. One great example, we had a recent podcast where the founder of Software Daily, Jeff Meyerson, came on, and he and Dan, our COO and the host of this episode, they started talking about like poker right off the bat because Jeff had been a professional poker player from like his late teens to early 20s. And they talked about like, oh, like how did your experience with poker and your mental models around that inform your approach to software engineering when you started? And it's super interesting. They clearly enjoyed the conversation, and it got them off to a great start. So I love that as a way to kind of dig into things.
Great. And then just for one other sort of Dev Interrupted episode that you would recommend for people to check out, it could be something fun, just one that maybe people had missed that you kind of want to give some more love to.
So I would say Catherine Calder's episode where she came on. So Catherine is the director of productivity engineering at Netflix. She's incredibly smart, incredibly interesting to listen to. And we actually had her back for a panel talking about continuous improvement with Charity Majors and Dana Lawson. And they had a great discussion there too. But Catherine's episode of the pod is fantastic. She does a wonderful job. The other one I'd shout out would be our Kessel Run episode. It's just highly underrated. It's one of our first episodes. I still think it holds up.
Great. And then for last two questions, then for Interact, you mentioned a little bit of some highlights. Is there any other type of really cool events? If anybody's on the fence, like here's something else like about Interact on September 30th.
Sure.
You're not going to win this.
Well, if our little sizzle reel to open to bring me out on stage didn't convince you, then I don't know what I can do. But I think some of the stuff that I would really highlight is one, we're really excited to partner with DZone on this. I know I got to hype it up because I'm on DZone Live, but it's totally true. Like I can't wait to engage with John and try to get John to show up and maybe do a fun little session with us for the after party or something like that. And we have these incredible short sessions we're going to be doing called. Can I swear, Blake? Just checking.
No, don't swear.
Okay, no swearing. Engineering screw-ups, where we bring out leaders and say, okay, like tell us a story about one of your big screw-ups in your experience, and then how have you learned from that? How have you taken those learnings? So they're going to be these like bite-sized 10 to 15 minute, maybe 5 sometimes, stories of these major mistakes by engineering leaders and senior engineers. And then we're going to convert those into these mini talks that we're going to sprinkle throughout the conference. We're also going to have a panel talking about how to do hypergrowth at a startup. So bringing on a current CEO and co-founder who's also a former VP of engineering, bringing out the CTO of Lightrix, another CEO who's also in hypergrowth mode, and another VP of engineering who's in hypergrowth mode, to do an in-depth panel talking about how they're growing their engineering teams, particularly in a remote first world. And I think that's going to be incredibly fascinating stuff to listen to. The other one that I'd even mention, and I know I keep going on about this, but Henrik Gudel from Microsoft is going to be coming in to talk to us about their research that Microsoft's been doing around developer velocity and how to use that to really enhance the output of your teams. And I love it because it's very developer first research, where it's so easy with a lot of tools or this research to say, oh well, we have to make things so efficient no matter what. Like we need to do this, and it gets really hard on developers. It's kind of like top down vision. And with this research and with everything that Linear B and DevInterrupt are doing on this conference, we're trying to make sure that we are being developer up, so that we're prioritizing devs, as my friend Ben Matthews said on a recent podcast with us. He's director at Stack Overflow. We are developers first, and that's what matters to us.
Great. So we got the links to that into the chat, and then the last question, same one I ended with John Vester on. What are some of the trends for next year that you think we'll be talking about, and what are some of the ones that you're most interested in or excited about?
So I think there's a really obvious one that's already happening, where there's been this backlash at a lot of these big companies towards remote work, where they don't want to see that continue. But the bottom line is remote work is winning. Work from anywhere is going to be the norm for anyone who has a digital job. And that means developers, that means writers. We are going to be able to work where we want to, and we're going to get more flexibility. And that is going to be a thing that has to be accepted. And it's already a differentiator in recruiting. It's a differentiator in where you'd go to. I live in Tumwater, Washington, a little bit south of Seattle. I would never take another job that wasn't work remote. And I think there's a lot of people like me. So that's one that I think we're already seeing that now, but it's going to continue to accelerate. I think it's going to have even more and more impact over the next year or so. A second one is going to be, I think we'll see a continued impact from VR. That's something we haven't really talked about as much, I think, lately. Got a lot of hype when things were opening up, and maybe a year's too early, but this is something where we're still very, very early on this, and it's going to be continuing to accelerate over the coming years. So you can just keep seeing more and more. It's going to get better and better. This might be more like a 2 to 5 years out thing, but that's definitely one. And then another one that, I personally am a big believer in is, I think we're going to see continued massive changes due to the use of blockchain technologies and distributed ledger. It's already happening. We're seeing these kind of crypto winters be much shorter. And I think there's a massive potential in those techs to continue exploding over the next year.
Excellent. Well, it was so great to have you on, Connor, to talk about all the amazing things with DevInterrupted.
Thanks for having me, Blake.
Like how a podcast can not only like putting out great content, but it's almost like you're at like the forefront of the software industry. You've got all the big people out there talking, and very storytelling, authentic, but telling really great stories where you can get actionable insights and things you can roll into your own work, whether you're at a large company,
super exciting stuff,
at a small one. You've got the Interact coming up, which we're excited to partner on. We're going to have some type of fun event there. But really great to have you on today. We put the link to the chat and to everything. And so thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much, Blake. And yeah, definitely tune in next week for the Brendan Burns episode of DevInterrupted. He'll be talking about his founding of Kubernetes and his work in Microsoft. And then, we'll hopefully see everyone September 30th for Interact.
Awesome. Thanks again.
Thanks, Blake.
All right. And then for our last guest of DZone Live, episode 7, Mr. Magic, Mr. Thomas Hansen. Thomas, you are on live. So tell people a little bit about Thomas Hansen, what you do, what's going on with your background. And there's like another thing that I saw, like just browsing where there's LinkedIn or somewhere, but on GitHub, you're sort of like a big deal in Cyprus.
Yes, I actually got to know today by an acquaintance of mine on LinkedIn that apparently I am the #1 contributor to GitHub in the country of Cyprus. Now, Cyprus is a small country though, so I mean internationally I'm still a small timer. However, in Cyprus, I'm actually the by far largest contributor with more than 60%, up from #2. I think #2 in Cyprus has 4,000 commits since 2017. I have 6,900 commits in the same period. So I am the by far largest GitHub contributor in Cyprus. And personally, of course, that warms my heart, being an open source evangelist and true believer, having 3 projects in the Arctic Code Vault, etc., etc. So that was nice to know.
Great. And then a little bit about your view. Like people are like Cyprus, like as in Cyprus, the island, or like for people.
Yeah, Cyprus, the island.
And so you got this amazing, this is like your view right now. This is in a Zoom background.
This is my office, literally. This is my office. This is where I am literally creating the magic. So, and of course, magic being 100% open source, also part of the Arctic Code Vaults, at least in theory, according to, Svalbard and Microsoft, capable of actually surviving an asteroid impact or something. So if humanity goes extinct and 25 million years from now, some alien archaeologists lands on the Earth, they'll actually find my code, which is kind of cool. So
Nice.
I think that matters, right? I mean, we all want to leave something behind, right? I mean, we all want to like live forever-ish in a way. Well, I mean, this is one of my attempts.
Got it. And then, so for those not familiar with, when we're talking about magic, your software, tell people a little bit about it and what it can do for them.
So Magic, actually, I wrote an article for the largest Norwegian IT company in 2010, I think it was, at which point I had an epiphany. And the name of the article, directly translated into English, was basically teaching your grandma how to create software. And I just became obsessed because I realized, you know what? I can do this, right? Now, it took me 10 years to realize I could never teach grandma to create software, not because of the lacking of the tooling space that I was capable of actually creating, but rather because grandma doesn't want to create software, right? However, at some point around 6 months ago, I actually made the bar so low that I can now actually largely automate the process, like 100%. Using low code and no code constructs for creating backend database driven administration apps. I click a button, 1 second, boom, I got a backend. Click another button, 1 second, boom, I got a front end. And of course, according to neutral research in this, we know that the average human software developer is capable of producing maximally 750 lines of code per month. That's a DZone article, by the way. And my system produces 750,000 lines of code per minute, right? So, I mean, there we are. So that's why I call it magic. I mean, because you click a button and magic happens and you get 100 man-months worth of work in a zip file. So
nice. Yeah, so that's a great thing. So I put a link there. And then also, let's talk a little bit about your latest article. So you've been at the forefront of low code, no code. So a lot of people are like, it's that citizen developer stuff. Maybe we won't be talking about it again in 2018. Maybe we won't be talking about it again in 2019. And here we are in 2021. And your latest article, Go Low Code or Go Extinct, has been one of the most popular articles on DZone since it launched. And I think you said over this last weekend, it was going crazy on your side too.
It was. That article actually resulted in, I think the day after I published it, I had 822 page views on my website, which was like, wow, up from like 20 the day before or something. So, I mean, obviously I hit a nerve there, but I mean, seriously, and I don't mean to, I know, every single time I write an article, 25% of the world becomes angry at me, and it's consistently a different part of the world, right? So I've now effectively made everybody angry at me. Sorry, guys. I'm just a messenger here, man. Don't shoot me. either I would do it or somebody else would do it, right? At least I've got the passion, you know. I just hooked up a guy looking for a job, a junior dev. He's been a year without a job. I just hooked him up with a recruiter on LinkedIn today because he was polite, and he was actually the guy who tipped me off about that. I was the biggest open source contributor in Cyprus, and you know, it's more like a warning. It's not like, you know, I'm going to steal your job. It's more like a warning. I mean, you know, because, you know, software development primarily is about automation. And in a way, I mean, you can say that this is kind of like a little bit of karma because software developers have snatched all the other jobs for 50 years, right? And it's just really a matter of time before low code reaches that point where it's actually able to 98% replace the software developer. There will still exist the need for software development. There will always exist the necessity for a human touch. But I mean, spending 6 months creating an Angular front end, 2 years down the road, that's not even going to be a work. That's not even going to be a job, you know, because these tools can do it automatically for us 100% better, 100% faster, million times less expensive, and so on and so on. So that's why I say what I say. I want developers to, you know, embrace this, because I believe those that are early adopters and embraces it early are actually able to create a local optimum for themselves, and in such a regard actually creating job security for themselves. So I'm not here to steal anybody's jobs. I'm just here to take away the boring parts. That's the way you got to look at it. You know, if you're a software developer today, how much of your job is boring? I know for me, that number is 80%. You know, do I really want to sit and copy, paste crap off from Stack Overflow? No. You know, I want to spend the time doing the interesting parts, you know, applying the kick-ass, algorithms. You know, or the really, you know, interesting parts. That's what I want to spend my time on doing. So my question to the software developers whom are hurt by my opinions in regards to this is, what do you want to spend your time on? You know, are you a code monkey, or are you an engineer or an artist? You know, take a pick.
And you also mentioned, like, so when we were talking about low code, then on, you know, for developers, you still want to get sort of up to speed on the frameworks, the libraries. So if the teams are using tools, like, you still can basically help to even to take them further and to automate even more as a developer.
Exactly. And you see, I didn't really realize, and actually you made me discover the word low code and no code. I didn't even know that was a word before a couple of months ago, which is really, really pathetic, because arguably I had been leading this movement for a decade, more than a decade. Now, but there actually isn't anything new about this. I mean, if you've ever used NPM or Nuggets or a library or a DLL on Windows, you've been using low code. This is just an incremental addition to the existing package repository you have, either at Nugget or at NPM or at whatever, apt-get for that matter, right? It's a package repository. And in a way, low code is just an incremental improvement of our existing abilities to use libraries and tools and frameworks and things like that. So, I mean, do you really want to reinvent the wheel yet again? Are you suffering from the, you know, not invented here syndrome, or are you willing to use the best tool in order to maximize your own productivity, in order to be as much valuable for your employer as you can possibly be? I mean, those are the two options. You know, do you want to write your own, you know, TCP IP stack in C, or do you want to use a library, right? Well, in a way, this is the no code thing too, right? Because there's really nothing new to it, actually.
Yeah, and we had Javier Teso on DZone Live like 2 weeks ago, and he mentioned, like, for low code, like, in about a few years, it's going to be like 80-90% of the market. So it's not going away anytime soon. According to Gartner, within the end of 2021, 50% of all software will be produced with low code and no code constructs. Now, even if that number is inflated or not, it's really quite irrelevant. The point is, it's gaining traction fast, very, 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 very fast. And you should jump on the train before it's too late. And I knew like somebody was going to ask about it. So let's put this, someone in chat says, wants to make sure that you talk about your article. I declare war upon AWS, Azure, Silicon Valley, assume not the TV show because the TV show is great, and every single government on earth.
Well, that was my, as I told you previously, I'm capable of making 25% of the world angry every single time I write anything. You know, it's really about censorship. It's really about empowering the little man. It's really about, you know, the way I believe, I feel that Silicon Valley has entered, you might arguably say, a malicious relationship with governments today. And of course, and I need to explain this. So, I mean, politically, I'm an anarchist. However, nobody who doesn't understand the Greek language actually knows what that word means. I don't like Molotov cocktails. I don't stock up on guns. I'm not violent. Quite the contrary. I'm fundamentally a pacifist. Of course, up to some extent. I mean, we're all pacifists up to some extent. But it's about on Archon. On meaning without, Archon meaning leaders. You know, I don't need a president. You know, you need a president, I'm sure, go, man. But he ain't mine. You know, I don't care who he is. He is not mine, right? I didn't vote for him. I didn't sign a contract stating that he could rule me. So as long as I am not, and this is kind of like the context from within that article actually is written. I believe in autonomy. In freedom. It's a little bit diluted, you know. I don't really like, that's why I'm using the quote thing. So that's what the article is about. You know, I'd love to see a world where my village with 5,000 people was its own country. We could have our own president, you know.
Nice. And so not only like are you like doing great, amazing #1 in Cyprus on GitHub, but also recently, this week's flown by, but you've got 113 articles now. But the big thing is you just now reached 1 million page views on DZone.
Of course, compared to John Wester, which got like 22.7 million page views, right. It's like nothing. But I mean, you know, my articles are mostly about my own tools. And, you know, of course, John Wester writes about things that are like humongously popular, having 1 billion existing users and stuff like that. For me, that is a huge milestone. I mean, for me, that is like, wow. So, I mean, I popped a bottle of wine when I realized I had made the cut. So, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, congratulations to that. It's not like everybody, like you go to any platform and suddenly you get like 1 million page views.
No.
And so for you to get that, it's just a huge achievement. Getting 1 million page views, that's like almost like it's hard to even like comprehend something like that. But it's just a major milestone for you, and just the great content that you're putting out there. So congratulations to your 1 million page views on DZone. And where did you first learn about DZone? How did we even did you discover it and start writing for it?
Actually, I started, and I can't remember my username, but I actually started writing for DZone in, I think it was like 2007 or 2008. But that was under a different username. I had my own startup back then called GaiaWare, where we were creating Ajax libraries for ASP.NET. And then I think it's like 4 or 5 years ago, I registered my current account where I have 112 articles, something. For the record, I love DZone. I love you, Blake. You guys have given me an opportunity which I feel I would never have been possible to, you know, have without you guys. I just adore DZone. I mean, DZone is an amazing community where you can enter, you can either read and consume, find whatever article, that 750 number I gave you on lines of code per month. Where do you think I found it? At DZone. You find everything at DZone, right? If you have anything related to software development that you need the answer to, DZone, right? And if you have anything you want to share about your own experiences or something you want to teach, where can you do that and get an audience? I mean, if I write a blog on my website, I got 50 page views. If I write an article at DZone, I got 5,000, like this, you know. So you can't really compare it. I love you guys. You've been giving me an extremely valuable opportunity, and I simply adore you.
And along the same line, so one of our other like community members at DZone is Alariza. On the last DZone Live, he was like giving you a shout out, saying like it was so great because you were so open to feedback. And so that's just kind of like one of the things is like he's in the Netherlands, you're over in Cyprus, but like through DZone, you're able to connect in ways that otherwise you wouldn't.
Actually, that's one of the features I've intended to build into Magic too, as an automated, integrated feature in the dashboard. You go to the bazaar, you can actually create your own feature request, and then you can actually track it over time and see progress and my feedback in regards to it. And whenever I close it, you get an automated response from within the Magic dashboard saying, this is fixed in this version, upgrade here. So I truly want to make Magic a much more community-driven project and a much more agile project than it has so far been. But I mean, so far it's been extremely research-heavy. That period is starting to tip now. And of course, I do have a link to all of those watching this YouTube video where I'm showing a really cool feature in Magic, which I'm really proud about. I've spent a lot of time figuring this out. And it's actually about foreign keys and referential integrity and being able to do lookups on external linked database tables to populate select drop-down lists and autocompletes and stuff like that. So, and that is actually exclusive content only for those watching this video, actually. And I'm looking for beta testers to help me find bugs. And of course, it's 100% open source, obviously.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I got a link to your Twitter and to the chat. I put a link to that YouTube video in there so everybody can check that out. And it's great just to see like you and Alariza connect, be able to help each other out. And then 3 more questions. So then one, like since over your 113 articles on DZone, what's like, we talked about a few, but what have been like 1 or 2 of your favorites or one that like the audience should check out that we might have missed? My favorite article is actually the saddest one. It was the 1st of April's joke a couple of years down. Which one is it? The one about teaching your cats hiring a cat as a software developer. It's a really, really funny article. Everybody should read it, even though it actually has a serious undertone, which is like, you know, the cat clicks the button, you get software. I mean, Magic is at that point now where you can actually do that. But at the same time, the cat died, right? 3 months later. So, and he was my favorite cat ever. We still have one other cat. She is called Happy though. She's probably around here somewhere. I'm not sure if she shows up here before we're done. But and then you have some of the more funny articles, teaching yourself domain-driven design in 5 minutes and stuff like that, which obviously aren't entirely seriously meant, right? I mean, and I'm really good at stirring the pot. I mean, you know, I'm really good at getting 25% of the world to hate me. Really, it's nothing personal. And realize if you're amongst the haters, you're like, there are 7 billion other out there. They all hate me for one reason, not the same, although unfortunately. So, and that is actually I mean, I very often tend to create very, very controversial headlines, unfortunately. I'm not sure if that is gift or a curse. So nice. And then so we got the same person ask, how about dogs?
Oh, I love dogs too. We salvaged a dog, me and my wife, in Serbia in 2015. We brought him through 10 borders. He was like this big. He was on his way to starving to death. We found him in the city of Nice in Serbia. We were camping throughout the entirety of Europe with our camping car. And we just took the dog with us and we fed him, we gave him medicine, we brought him to Norway. We had him ourselves for a year, but then we had to move to Cyprus, so we gave him away to a friend of ours. However, Magic is actually his name. The name of the dog is Magic. And we adopted him away to a very dear friend of us, and he is still alive and happy, living with a family in a farm in the outskirts of some small village in Norway. So I love dogs too. Yeah, we'll have to get a picture of Magic in one of the next articles, things like that, so we can check them out.
And then two last questions. So then for when we look ahead for next year with trends in software and developers, all that stuff, what are the trends that you're seeing for 2022, and what are the trends that excite you the most?
Well, I've already answered that question in a way you could argue.
Okay.
Low code, no code. I personally believe more in low code than no code, for the same reasons. I realized that grandma doesn't want to create software, and I don't think the CEO of some 20,000 employee large company is going to ever write software either, regardless of how simplified we make the process. So I still believe in software developers. I just don't believe in the current process they are applying, which is extremely manual in regards to how to end up with the end result. But low code, no codes. Obviously, I agree with some of the previous participants in regards to work anywhere. I mean, this is my office yet again. This is where I'm literally creating the magic. So yes, be envious of me. Automation. I mean, software has one single reason for existing. That is automation, period. I mean, if software doesn't make your job easier, you shouldn't be using software, right? It's the sole purpose of software is to make a job easier. Its mechanism to achieve that is automation. So obviously, code automation is the next step.
Nice. And I realized I forgot like one important question. So if somebody were to stop you in a grocery store, at a trade show somewhere else, and say, Thomas, I really want to start writing. I love like what you're doing. What are like one or two writing tips that I should take in mind so that I can also one day hopefully be as good a writer as you?
You start out with your foot in your mouth. That's my technique. I realize I'm alienating a lot of people, but you can't please everyone. I have my audience, I have my fans, I have my people who adore me, and you seriously, I'm old, right? I mean, I'm obviously grown up. I have lots of things here. The faster you realize you can't please everyone, the happier you will be. So controversial headlines.
So essentially just stay true to yourself and write what you know about. And it's when you get out of that you can kind of run into trouble.
Yeah. And actually, I perceive the act of teaching through writing technical articles, trying to teach others something, as an extremely selfish thing. Because you don't know anything before you've taught it away. And the only way you can actually learn something is by teaching. So from my point of view, it's a selfish act, actually.
Great. And then for the last question as we wrap up, and just again, it was a huge honor to have you on today, be able to congratulate you on those 1 million page views on DZone, share your articles. We put them into the chat. We found out about your dog Magic, some of your favorite articles, and a little bit more insight. And then just to kind of bring us home, since you're out there on the island of Cyprus, for those that don't get to enjoy this type of life, what are some of the things that you, if you can end on, what are some of the things that you love or like that's interesting about Cyprus and living there?
It's an amazing culture. Cyprus is probably the closest you come to an actual functioning anarchy in Europe, inside of the EU. Cats are holy animals here on the island, arguably. And the reasons is because they were brought to the island in the year of 325 by Emperor Constantine's mother, Saint Helena, who brought them to the island because there were so many snakes here. And I find this religious, analogy and background history of the cats on this island to be extremely fascinating in myself, considering myself to be a spiritual person. And so cats are like holy animals. And in a way, this has entered a symbiotic relationship with the people, where the people and the culture has ended up becoming cats. If you've ever heard the expression, managing a software development department is like herding cats. Well, the whole island is cats here. You can't tell a Cypriot what to do. Believe me. Try tell a Cypriot what to do, and you'll rapidly understand what I mean, that they're cats. And that's one of the things I love about Cyprus. They have really embraced me like one of their own. They are amazing, open, amazing hospitality. If you've never been to Cyprus, you really got to come here, at the very least for a vacation for 2, 3, 4 weeks, whenever these, COVID thing ends, of course. But it's an amazing island.
And you're like at maybe like a 1 or 2 minute walk from the beach every day?
Yeah, well, it's actually quite far because as you can see the altitude difference, even though you can see the sea behind there roughly. So, but the altitude difference is like 250 meters, which is actually to my advantage because it's actually significantly colder up here than down by the beach, and we have much more breeze. So we live on a hill. But yes, we're at the beach in 5 minutes with a car, or you can walk, but you really don't want to. When it's 45 degrees in the shade, you simply can't survive outside. You know, it's like, you know, and we've had a heat wave now for a month where it was like more than 40 every single day. So
nice. Is that your favorite place of all the places you lived in the world? Would you say Cyprus is your favorite?
I love every part of the world. I've lived 3 years in California. I loved California for a lot of other reasons. I also love Norway for completely different reasons. I grew up in North Norway, possibly the most beautiful place on earth, just outside of Lofoten, Lofoten. If you haven't seen it, you got to do a Google image search for it. You're going to be amazed by the mountains and the fjords and everything. But I currently, Cyprus is my wife. I do have a normal wife too, like a human being, but and of course she's more of a wife to me, but I am very much in love with Cyprus. So
yeah, I agree. I've been up to Oslo, which is I guess a little bit further south. Just that whole area when you're flying, it's like one of those times you really want like that the window seat in an airplane, because just the views up there in Norway are just like simply amazing.
Thank you. I agree. Obviously, I grew up there. I grew up in Lofoten, so that was my hometown.
All right, so that's really it for today. Is there any upcoming articles you want to mention? We've got the video that people can check out for Magic. Any other article or articles upcoming people should expect from you, Thomas?
Well, the video I shared is me demonstrating a beta release of Magic Cloud, where I show how you can, scaffold, you generate a backend, clicking a button, you generate a front end, clicking a button. Most people who've ever seen Magic Cloud before has seen that part. However, I've been working extensively. The next release of Magic is going to be the biggest and by far most impactful release I've probably ever created, because among other things, the scaffolded results take care of referential integrity, foreign keys, lookup, all sorts of things. And the video, which you shared like 15 minutes ago, demonstrates that feature, and it also contains a link to the beta release. I would love to have feedback and have the DZone team test it out, try it out, find bugs, and help me stabilize this release. It's going to be the by far most important release of Magic I've ever created. So
excellent.
So that's going to be probably my next article. I'm probably going to spend like half a week more before I create this release, and then I'm going to definitely showcase it in one of my DZone articles.
That's great. So just thanks again for your time. First time being on DZone Live. It's great. Have some island view from Cyprus. Definitely everybody go low code or go extinct. According to Thomas, check out his software. There's links in the chat where you can find him on Twitter. We've got a link to the YouTube video. We've got a link to his DZone profile, and we'll hope to see a picture here at some point of his dog, rescue dog, Magic, so that we can see that as well. But huge thanks to being on today, and have a great rest of your Thursday, Thomas.
Thanks, Blake, and thanks for having me.
All right, so this is Blake wrapping us up for DZone Live, episode 7. Had amazing guests from John Vester to Connor at Linear B, over to Thomas talking today. Just some exciting things coming up on DZone. So we're working with Linear B on Interact. We're going to be at KubeCon in LA in October. We're always looking for new content. So if you got original content, let us know. We're easy to find. So come on over and write for DZone. If you can find us on LinkedIn, we're almost at 5,000 followers. We've got just an amazing site, amazing community. So anything we can do to help out, let us know. If you ever want to get on DZone Live and speak, also let us know. But that is it for DZone Live episode 7. We hope everyone got something from it, and have a great rest of your Thursday, and see you next time on DZone Live.